Greetings, friends, and welcome to our first Haunting Stories prop build. As if you click at the link down below, there is an intro to these haunting stories, and this is our first one, the story of Evelyn Filtch. Now, this tombstone, I want it to be a simpler tombstone because of the story behind it. It wanted to be an older style and got, skull in the center with some decor and not much else. You'll also want to get some fake roses for this, and that's pretty much all you're going to need. So anyways, the story will be at the very end. The build will be coming right up. Enjoy. As you saw at the beginning of the video, we're making the Evelyn Filtch tombstone, which you'll understand at the end of the video when you see the description that goes along with this, or the vocal part that goes along with this. So down below, there's going to be a file, as it will be with all these types of tombstones in the future. You will have an exact file for what I envisioned this to be. Now, you'll find two of these. You only really have to cut out one of those, but I put two on because I didn't have to use up paper. One of these, and you want to cut out the details. This one, you want to cut out loosely, because we're going to be gluing this one on because we can't cut that out directly. And then the final bit is this, which is the curve for the top of the tombstone. Now, you need to find a piece of styrofoam that is 15 inches wide by, this one is going to be about 28.5. If you can't find a piece, or your scrap isn't as big as this, or it's bigger, you can adjust the length of this tombstone as much as you want. But as you can see, this is a very beat up piece of styrofoam, and that's great for this because it, once again, adds character. So the first thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be putting in a flat bottom. This is, you can see, obviously just a line to make sure that everything is flat from this point, because that's pretty crooked. It would be a very tippy tombstone, but it'd still look cool actually. So from there, you measure 18.5 inches up, and you will have this, and using you can either use a square or you can measure up on the other side. You'll do a second one of those. Then you're going to take Mr. Template, and you'll see that there's a registration mark on it. Now, what I suggest you do now is you put a mark at the bottom. Once you've got this on here, put a mark at the bottom and mark over there at the same point, so you know that this is going to end up at the same height both sides. Draw this line and include this downside here. So you come down that line just a little bit. Then you flip this over and do the exact same thing. I'll be back. All right, you now have your top line drawn. We're gonna cut this out after. You can use whatever tool you want. A coping saw if you're doing thin styrofoam. If you're doing thicker styrofoam all at once, you may have to bandsaw this, but thinner styrofoam, do individual layers and then glue them together after, or just go thin styrofoam. These tombstones can be 2 inches, but I like the way they look when they have a bit more thickness to them. Now, starting with that line that we drew here to line up the original template to draw the top, you're going to measure 6 inches down and you're going to put a line in. What's that for? Well, that's just strictly 100% to make sure that these are kind of straight to each other. Then, measuring 1.5 inches in on the edge here, you draw a line. Same with over here, 1.5 inches in, draw a line. What this does is it gives you the side where these pieces of paper template will line up to. Then it's simple as getting the skull, placing it on, pinning it on as close to center as you can get. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the pen. We're going to trace around this whole thing, because on mine, I'm routering this out. You have the ability to do multiple different ways of pulling this off. You can use a knife and you can flick the pieces out as you do it. I'm doing both techniques. This is going to be routered. I'm going to be doing a routered edge on the actual tombstone itself when it's cut out. And then when we get to the lettering, which is going to be here, this is going to be done with the cut and pull method. And what it does is it just leaves it as a really nice looking lettering. Because we're putting grout on this lettering may become obscured just a little tiny bit, but that's okay. It'll make it look old. What is it, 1935? So yeah, it's got a few years to look old. Anyways, I'm going to trace this out. I'm going to then go glue this on with spray glue. I'll be back to talk about that one. So kind of just going to show you what happened after the fact. After I spray glued this down, I used this line here as a gauge for where the top of the letters were to make sure it's all square. Then, while this is on, you're going to use this knife and I like this blade for this. And what you do is you keep on pushing vertically down as you go along, and you end up with a pretty decent line that's not pulled. And it's one of the big things you want to make sure you don't do here is you don't pull the styrofoam. And then once you've got it all cut, this paper will want to almost release itself. Like, it comes off very easily. You'll probably find it even as you're using the knife to get it all done. If I can get it, there we go. You'll see that for the most part, it doesn't stick too bad. And you'll see now we have got leftovers. So we're going to leave that. Now, this spot here, I'm going to use needle nose pliers. And what this is good for is it allows you to clear the material out of these letters quickly. And what you do is, because now we got nice flat edges, it likes to release. And you'll see that as you go along, it goes pretty quickly to clear out those letters. And then you can use the top of the needle nose pliers just to tidy up that little bit. Things that are really stubborn, you can use the knife to pull out, but I find that this works well. I'm going to go through, I'm going to get these letters all finished, cleaned up. And I'm also going to go and route this out, because that's our next step. We just got to do a little tiny bit of finishing when we're done here. Anyways, I'll be back. The letters are all cut out and punched out and made look all snazzy-like. This has all been routed out. I did this route at about 1/2 inch deep. You don't have to do it that deep. You can do it a little bit less if you so choose to. This is just done with a flat bit to get the material out. If you use the router, make sure you start in the middle and work out, because you may not have a base for the router to sit on as you go out. And pay attention to what you should route out and what you shouldn't route out, like that nose. That's what we call artistic expression right there. And then once you've got going, it actually goes pretty quick. Just wear ear protection. This really screamed when I did it with my router. Now, on the outside, I use a comb to just give it a nice bit of a look. Sadly, I can't do it on the back because the back of this styrofoam is something else. So, the only thing we're going to do now is, I'll come back and show you exactly how I finish it up. I am just going to do a tiny bit of chamfering of this edge, just so once the acrylic grout is on this thing, it doesn't break very easily. Sharp edges just lead to things being broken quite fast. Won't matter on the lettering as much because it's small. This is pretty up in the open, so I just want to make sure it is a little bit more copacetic. Anyways, I stopped the route about 8 inches from the bottom. I'll be very honest, I used the wrench for my router to make that spacing. You can do what you want, but this is really simple and it looks really nice to not do the whole thing routed. Anyways, I'll be back to talk about just the final steps on it. I'm also going to put a stress fracture here to make it look cool, because that's what all the cool tombstones have. Anyways, I'll be back. Now we see everything is done here. I went through and I chamfered these edges very gently, and I noticed that my skull is crooked, but it adds character. That was just a screw up on my behalf. Anyways, the only thing that I did here was a crack. And I did this by taking the knife, sticking it in, and just flicking out the pieces of foam. Because these are usually made out of granite, they don't crack with like a perfect crack in it. Usually when a crack goes, you'll have like a hairline crack, and then as the water gets in, it'll flare it all out and break it. So that's why I went with this. And I went right through, because usually a crack connects. Very rarely do they start and end. But I did one of the start and end cracks right here. So you can do as little or as much weathering as you want. You can also see that I did on this edge. I chamfered it with the knife and then took a few nicks out of it. Age it up to the level that you want it. The acrylic grout's going to hide a bunch of this, but if not, it's what you want to do to this point and how much weathering you want. This is as far as I'm going, and now I'm going to go be putting on a black base coat, and then I'll be back to talk about the acrylic grout. All right, we are down to the final step, which is coating with the epoxy, the acrylic grout that's pictured right here. I'll put a link in the description as well. It's just a simple matter of painting it on. Use a finer brush to go around here, but don't go into the gaps for the black, just because it gives it that really good strong lettering there. Then the next step is to weather it how you like it. This is done by putting on about 3 or 4 coats of tea, and then I did a big coat of tea here that dripped down. You can see some of the drips. Just gives it a really nice, almost like an old sandstone look. I love the way this turns out. Then I finish it up with a black wash on a spray so it spatters, and if you look really closely, you can see the spatter marks of the black. Anyways, then when you're going to finish this up, you get some roses because of the story you're going to be hearing right away. A skull to make the graveyard look fantastic. And just like that, you're done your Evelyn Filtch gravestone. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe and enjoy the haunting story of Evelyn Filtch.
Evelyn Filtch. Most do not know where her story began, but like a good book, the end was unexpected, to say the least. Nobody had figured that the old widow who lived on the hill was anything more than that. She was known far and wide for her prized roses that bloomed in a brilliant crimson, almost surreal red. Many asked her secret. She refused to tell. Legend has it, a jealous neighbor, wanting those roses, snuck up in the middle of the night to steal a plant for herself. Digging under a full moon, she then discovered Evelyn's secret. There in the rosebed, as she clawed away the dirt with her hands, she came upon something hard. And there, in the surreal light of the moon, she saw a small human skull. The roots of the rose entwined throughout. Stumbling backwards, she ran into the night. The next morning, the constabulary arrived, and within days, 20 sets of bones had been excavated. Evelyn's story ended soon after, but the roses, they were cut down, but grew back every year. The deep and cursed crimson blooms returned, a grim reminder of the darkness that fed them.